welcome to Relatively Famous, the podcast where we talk to relatives of famous people. And on this episode, I'm super excited because I got the nephew of what used to be the king of late night talk show. Before there was Colbert, before there was O'Brien, before there was Letterman, Fallon, Ferguson, Arsenio Hall, there was Johnny Carson, and he was the king of late night television. And on this episode, we get to know a little bit more about his nephew, Chris Carson, and his father, Dick Carson, also was a famous director of Wheel of Fortune, Merv Griffin Show, and some of The Tonight Show. So without further ado, let's bring on Chris Carson.
Relatively Famous podcast with Chip White.
Welcome back to Relatively Famous, and today's guest is Chris Carson. I'm super excited about that. Chris, we go back in pretty good ways. Let's just be transparent. We've been friends for a long time. There's a lot of connection. My sister was actually on your uncle's show a couple of times. I think the favorite one was back in April of '87 with Sammy Davis Jr. And like I said, you and I have known each other for a while. Let's just jump right in. Tell our viewers, about yourself.
I'm a California native. I was born here. As you mentioned, my dad is a television director, and so I grew up in San Diego and Los Angeles. Went to school, educated, college here, and eventually ended up working in television for 23 years along with you, which were definitely some of the best years of my life, for sure. I loved working with you, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. But still live in Los Angeles, working in real estate now, kind of semi-retired, I would say. But my father and Johnny are brothers.
So what was it like when they got together as brothers? I know that every family's a little dynamic difference. What was it like for you, kind of watching them as brothers? Because and kind of walk us through that part of your life of, kind of their relationship as you saw it, and then we'll get back into. I want to know more about you. This is really about you than them. So, but
I'm far less interesting though. But it was having Uncle John, as I called him, as an uncle was kind of cool, actually. It was kind of a fun novelty that I experienced growing up. And my dad and Johnny started working together in New York on The Tonight Show in '62. So I would have only been 4 years old. I didn't understand really the magnitude of Johnny's presence at that time because I was just a kid. But as I got older, I started to understand, just how popular he was. And my father directing the show at that time, I think back and it's just really incredible. I mean, they were, in the early to mid, actually through '62 through 1970, my dad directed the show. And these were the days. You remember? Were you a fan of Mad Men? Did you watch much of Mad Men?
Oh yeah, that was amazing. I love the
set
design,
the great,
and the reality of it.
Well, that's exactly the period of time that my dad and Johnny worked together in New York City, and for 8 years we lived in a suburb of New York City. But I think back on those days, and that's when everybody wore like a suit and a tie and a hat and an overcoat and carried a briefcase. And I've got pictures of my dad and Johnny back at that time, and it's like a scene right out of Mad Men. And I think back and I think, man, what a time those guys must have had. They were like, in the '60s, a really cool time in history, and Johnny was totally on top of his game and just dominated late night. My father was directing the show, and they must have just been like the kings of New York City. You know, I mean, everywhere they went, they just could get into any restaurant or a theater show. It's just like the heyday of their careers. I just can't imagine how much fun it must have been for the two of them.
Yeah, that's kind of like
But
the Rat Pack of television, man. Johnny Carson was the king back then.
exactly, and you mentioned the Rat Pack. I mean, those are the days when they had guests like, you know, Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. and the classics. You know, I mean, they were all regular guests on the Tonight Show. So it must have just been just a fantastic era.
Yeah, I love that. Now, Johnny had a huge shadow, and your dad cast a pretty big one too, because he was super nice. But let's talk a little bit about you and kind of, you know, when I first met you, it was probably 1989 or so. What were you doing then? You know, because you weren't in the entertainment business at the time. Kind of talk a little bit about that history and that point in your life.
Yeah. It's funny because my family, Johnny and my dad, both were sort of, you know, recommended that I don't go into the television or entertainment business because they thought it was, you know, a really difficult business and could be really heartbreaking because there's, you know, it's hard to be successful in that business. It's, you know, very competitive. But how I ended up getting into it, you're right. I wasn't involved in the television industry at all. But the weird part, or the incredible part, is that I was playing in a band at the time, and the band, two of the people in my band were from New Jersey, and we had played this one club in Los Angeles one night, and we all went out afterwards to a sushi restaurant in Studio City, and meeting us there was this couple, this man and his wife who I didn't know any. They were strangers to me. But we all sat down and had a great dinner, and we're there till 1 a.m, something like that. And it turns out that this couple that were there, the husband turns to me at one point and he goes, you know, I know your father and your mother really well. And I was like, what? I didn't know what the connection could be at all. But it turns out there's this man named Michael King and his wife Barbara, and which meant nothing to me at the time. I didn't know who they were. But over the next couple of weeks, I was chatting with some friends, and I'd mentioned that I'd met this man Michael King, and they were like, Michael King? Oh my God, he's like a super powerful television executive. You should develop that relationship and try to get a job there. That company's on fire, and you would do really well to take advantage of that opportunity. So I did. I started calling and got Michael on the phone a few times and said, I'd really like to come work for you. And I don't know, it took a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months, but the next thing I know, you called me to come in for an interview, and you and I met for the first time. And I think you're right. I think it was 88 or 89. And you were the office manager at the time, and you brought me in as the assistant office manager. And we had a lot of fun, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I kind of forgot that I brought you in as assistant office manager. Yeah, my short corporate career there at King World as office manager before I moved over to Inside Edition. The King World was amazing. Michael and Roger King were the gurus of syndication at that time. That was Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, Oprah, Inside Edition, American Journal, Little Rascals. I mean, we were the king at that company back then.
Yeah.
And then when I hired you, you had a couple of hot rods or a hot rod. You were going through a divorce because I had been through one, or I was going through one at the same time, and we talked about that, and we connected because you also surf. So kind of give our viewers and listeners a little breakdown of your hot rods and that, that not happy part of your life, and of course the surfing part is always happy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was out in the water yesterday morning. I know you're going to be jealous.
I am. There's no water
Yeah,
here in San Antonio.
it's true. You're a long way from the ocean, but we'll get you back out here at some point. We'll get in the water. Yeah, hot rods. Like I say, I grew up in Southern California, and cars, hot cars, and muscle cars, and were quite popular. And I definitely was attracted to that culture. But in terms of hot rods, I was into drag racing. Not street racing, but actual drag racing on professional tracks and whatnot. And I had uh, dragsters. I had over the course of, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, I had three different cars. And it was just a ton of fun. I mean, I've always been really mechanically inclined, and my particular car, the last car I had, would run the quarter mile in about 8.5 seconds at 160 miles an hour. So that was really a lot of fun, and enjoyed that for many years. Um,
Okay, I want to jump in.
Drag
I want to
racing.
jump into your drag racing career. That was because I remember seeing a couple of your cars. What got you into it? I mean, it's not something everybody does. It's an expensive hobby. It's not like you're
Yeah.
usually going to make some money. What got you into it? How long did you do it? I think you said like 15 years. But talk about some of the wins, the losses. Did you crash? Seemed like I remember hearing something about a crash. So I
Yeah.
definitely want to hear about the drag racing part because I find that fascinating. Um,
Well, it was super fun, and the way I first got into it is when I was growing up here in the San Fernando Valley. I had a neighbor that lived two, three doors down who was a drag racer, and he had a son that was my age, and we were close friends. And that was what my initial exposure is that I would go to the track with them. This was when I was too young to drive, probably 14, 15 years old, and I just totally like turned on to the sport. I just loved it sounds funny, but the smell of burning rubber and tire smoke and oil and gasoline, and I just loved it. It was really a big attraction for me. So always wanted to do it myself. When I finally got to be an age and had a little bit of money that I could spend on a hobby like that, I started shopping for cars, and got my first car, which, by the way, is the one that I did crash. And I used to, my wife, Deb, was never a big fan of it because, there's a certain element of danger to it, obviously, like any auto racing. But I used to say, oh, don't worry, this is a piece of cake. A monkey could drive one of these. And I was wrong about that. So one Friday night at LA County Raceway, I was in a race, and still to this day don't know exactly what happened. But the car, I was about three-quarters of the way down the track, probably 120 miles an hour at that point, and the back tires just got loose and started to fishtail, and I ended up slamming into the guardrail, rolling the car over the guardrail off the track, and probably rolled 3 or 4 times before it came to a stop, and literally broke the car in half. Literally the front half and the back half separated. But I got to say, honestly, besides a little bit of the headache, I didn't have a scratch on me. So it was perfectly fine, except I wrecked my car and scared my wife, half to death.
yeah,
But
that's not a cheap little accident either. What not to be too personal. What did something like that run back then? I mean, I've been
that,
in some drag racing shows and stuff, and I know these guys spend thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some people. What at your level? What was that financially to the family?
at my level, it's funny that you say that because I know exactly what you're talking about. Drag racing or auto racing, probably in general, is like this, but drag racing for sure. You can get in relatively cheaply, like the car that I'm talking about. Everything, my trailer, the car, parts, accessories, things like that. A total investment of probably $15,000, which is not not a a small chunk of money, but you're exactly right. I had racers that would park right next to me in the pits that would come in with a 30-foot motorhome and a giant enclosed trailer, and I mean they had hundreds of thousands of dollars wrapped up in their racing commitment, basically, and which is ironic because at that level, what they call the sportsman level, the non-professional level, even you could win the biggest race of the year, and you're only gonna win about $1,000. So it's definitely financially it's a losing proposition for sure. So you better really love it because you're not going to make any money. You're just gonna spend money. If you break even, yeah, I did actually. In my particular category, my car was what they call a Nostalgia 2 car. That was the class I ran in, and I won a number of races. And 1 year in particular, I placed second in the entire excuse me, in the entire West Coast, which was everything from Seattle down to Carlsbad, and then east as far as Salt Lake City, and a couple of tracks in in Arizona and Las Vegas. So that was kind of cool, out of, I don't know, a couple of hundred cars in that category, I ended up second in the West Coast series. So that was kind of cool. I got a nice trophy and I think $500.
Yeah, that paid for the one day there, not even your fuel and tires.
It didn't pay for my gas to and from, towing up to Seattle and back.
Yeah. Do you miss it?
I do, actually. I do. But I know you and I will probably talk about this a bit later, but I now have, I'm a father now. So I've got a beautiful 10-year-old daughter, and as much as I would like to get back into it, I just feel like the responsible thing to do would not to be, because, I could have another crash, or, anything could happen. And now that I've got a family of my own, I think I'll just be a spectator.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And you started a little later than I did, but we're both what I consider older fathers. And of course, you being in Hollywood, it's not that big of a deal. I guess not so much anymore. 10-year-old daughter. Talk about your family, man, because I love your wife. I love your daughter. You have a beautiful family. And
yeah,
what's
I really
that
do.
part of your life like now?
It's awesome. I know it sounds cliche, but I'm really blessed. I have a beautiful, wonderful, intelligent wife, Deb, who has had a lot of success on her own in her own career. She's for I'll say 12 plus years, she was a broadcaster for Fox Sports Radio, and only recently in the last year left that to pursue. Actually, she's working on a potential podcast, the Deb Carson podcast. I know that's in the works. I don't know when she's thinking of debuting that, but the ironic part, and another thing that ties us all together, you, me, your wife, Deb, our families, is that I met Deb when I was working at King World with you, and she was working specifically for Wheel of Fortune. So there's another weird connection. If I hadn't been working with you at King World, I would have never met her working at Wheel of Fortune. But we had to do business together. And I remember I spoke to her on the phone for probably a year and never had an opportunity to meet her in person. And then when I finally did, I don't know, probably on a remote or something, I was like, wow, she's a knockout on top of being a great associate at the show. She turned out to be this beautiful, beautiful girl as well. So we started dating, and you know how it goes from there. And then you're right, we were married for 15 years before we actually had a child, which is, most people get married and within a couple of years, maybe have or try to have a baby, but we I don't know. We both were, career oriented for that time, and then at a certain point we got the itch. I mean, definitely on the older side, but I don't know. I think older parents sometimes make better parents because you got a little more life experience under your belt. You see other people making mistakes with their kids that you learn from. But as a result, we've got this beautiful, beautiful, perfect 10-year-old daughter that is just the light of my life. She's fantastic, and she's a competitive swimmer. She last year in the 9-year-old category in her swim league, she placed first out of 160 kids. She was the number one overall swimmer. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, she gets that little competitive spirit from her dad and her mom. I know that her mom's a big sports person. I think that Deb actually did Vanna's job on the road when they were doing contestant searches, if I remember correctly. So there is a whole lot of weaving in our story. Um,
Yeah,
and
got all kinds.
I remember you said you played in a band when you first met Michael. Now, people that don't know King World, they were the biggest indicators. They were the money. I mean, for us, the 80s and 90s at King World were phenomenal. Our Christmas parties were amazing. And there was one Christmas party where there was always a contest. And there was a Christmas party where you, me, and this guy, Chris Baden, decided we were going to do an Elvis song. Now, Chris plays drums. Chris Baden played bass. I do not sing, but I did a little Elvis that night. Tell your version of the story, because mine always seems to be a little ego boosted because of my view. I want to hear your view of that night and our rehearsing of trying to do a little Elvis at a Christmas party.
Oh, it was great. It was great. That was a highlight for sure. We had a great time, and you're right. We got together, Chris Baden, you, myself. You've always been a huge, as I have been too, huge Elvis fan, and we decided that we thought we could pull off Heartbreak Hotel. So it sounds relatively simple. It's not a complicated song, but so we rehearsed a couple of times at your house, I remember. And we thought we kind of had it together. Didn't sound too bad, but you're right. King World was, powerful company at the time, and we used to have these really great holiday parties. And they would, like you say, they had a talent competition, and so we entered the talent competition, and I thought it was great. I mean, you when you put on your Elvis act, you're pretty entertaining. And we kind of banged our way through the song and came out. I don't know if you remember. Well, you must have, because you were out front. You were the front man. But 3 or 4 girls from the office like rushed the stage, and like like
Yeah.
like Elvis would like Elvis was on the scene.
Yeah,
And
that was a little
we
surprise. That almost threw me off my game for the rest of the song. Not that I was
I
any
thought
good to start with.
I thought you did a great job though, because I'm on the drums, in the back, and so I could see all these spotlights and everything. It was really it really was kind of a cool event, and we got a ton of applause, and I think we ended up getting second place in the talent show, and they gave us some money. I think we split up a few $100s
Yeah,
for our performance, but I think popularity wise, we stole the show.
we were the king.
You were.
There was another fun adventure, and just people are going, why these guys get so personal? But I remember, I think I was going through a divorce at the time, and you had been through yours, and we decided to go bungee jumping. Now, this was prior to bungee towers and amusement parks. This was totally some guy's random, illegal. We went out in the desert off of a gas pipe. There was 2 famous guys that weren't even famous at the time that were part of the team that met us there. My version is very extravagant and sounds extremely dangerous. I want to hear your version of that night, because we spent the night at your house, a bunch of us, and we did this cool bungee jump. I want to hear your version and see if it even, if I'm just delusional.
No, I think my version's going to jive with yours perfectly. You're right. We sort of had a little mini party the night before, like a little celebratory thing, like pre-adventure night. Everybody spent the night at my place, and we got up the next morning really super early. You know, the pitch black out, and we drove to this remote area. I couldn't even tell you exactly where it is, but you're right. This was the outlaw days of bungee jumping. There were no, like you say, places you would go to and pay to bungee jump. This was totally prior to that, and like I say, outlaw bungee jumping. But you're right. There was this big, deep ravine, hundreds and hundreds of feet deep, and spanning across it was this gas pipeline, which was maybe like, I don't know, 2 feet wide or something, and with a couple of cables that you could hold on to, and you had to, like, one at a time walk out on this gas pipeline, where these two guys who ran this operation would connect the bungee, and literally you would count down from 5 or whatever, and off the edge you would go. And it was really, I mean, we had a great time. It was really fun. Like I say, the outlaw kind of vibe of the whole thing was great. And ironically, like you said, there were a couple of guys who turned out to be huge television stars that were there with us. But they, I think their show. Can we talk about who they were?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so Beverly Hills 90210. I don't know if it had even started on the air yet, but it turns out in our group was Luke Perry and help me out. I'm trying to think of the other guy's name.
Jason
Priestley. Yeah, Jason Priestley and Luke, and who were super nice guys. We got along with them great, and it was good. I think there was maybe about 12 people total in our group.
I think so. I think we had probably 4 or 5. They had 4 or 5, and
yeah.
I remember Jason and Luke were like these small guys, and it's out in the Los Angeles forest, and where everybody had to pull each other up, and I had some great video of it. I had an old Super 8 camera back then, and I remember standing there before I jumped. I don't know about you, but I'm standing there, and they count, and I'm thinking, it's 30 minutes between 5 and the time I jumped, because it just felt forever. But on video, I jumped right away, and that scared the snot out of me. I felt like I was never going to jump, but on the video, I guess I jumped quick. And yours, man, all you guys are like just zoom, 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 and you're all coming off. I'm like, that was terrifying for me.
I don't know. I think we were all pretty terrified, to tell you the truth, but it was fun. I mean, it was really it was one of those extreme sport type things that you probably only do once or twice in your life at the most. But it was a blast. I loved it. I mean, I'd love to see that video if we still have it. But we had a great time.
I'll have to find it. It was, like I said, Super 8. I remember that one of our friends' boyfriends edited it for us. I made a story out of it, but it's been a while. It's all on tape. And most people, what the hell is a tape?
Right.
So speaking of, that was our little encounter with two famous people. Now, you've been in Hollywood your whole life. Your family's there. Let's just hit on some of the fun Hollywood stories that you have. Famous people you've hung out with, wild parties you've been to, because you're a wild, crazy guy. Some Hollywood friends. Are you friends with relatives of famous people?
I don't know that I am, actually. Besides you, you're probably the best friend of mine who's got a famous relative. But I would say I've met a ton of big television and film stars, but I haven't really formed any close relationships with anybody. But and not so many people now, like I'm never going to meet Taylor Swift or, somebody as contemporary as that. But back in our day that we're talking about, like in the 70s and the 80s, I mean, just about anybody you can think of, I probably met along the way, because I spent a lot of time at the Tonight Show. I had carte blanche, to come in and hang out backstage or watch the show from, right next, sitting on stage, basically right next, or just off camera, but on stage. And I used to love to do that. So I've probably been to the Tonight Show set and watched the show at least, probably 100 times. So those kind of visits to the Tonight Show would always, afford me the opportunity generally to meet the guests. Sometimes I would sit in the green room, and all the biggest celebrities of the day, musicians included, like I got to meet the guys in ZZ Top at one point, which I thought was maybe the coolest experience, because I love ZZ Top,
Yeah.
and to meet those guys in person was really a blast. And I always try to make it a point to let people know, like that, how much pleasure and entertainment that they've given me throughout my life. Like ZZ Top's a perfect example. I mean, I've got every ZZ Top record ever made, and I just love the guys, and they've provided me with a lot of entertainment over the years. And it's kind of nice to be able to meet somebody like that and then let them know how meaningful their music has been, to me during my lifetime. Most people don't get the opportunity to do that, so I feel, very fortunate that those kind of opportunities came my way directly because of my relationship with Uncle John.
Yeah, that you have had a great opportunity. Now, I have to kind of wrap up our conversation here. A couple of quick questions I want to ask. When did you realize that Johnny was famous, and did he ever take you out on the yacht?
Okay, that's easy. Yeah, I'd say I recognized he was famous, like really famous, probably when I was probably about 1966 or 67. I would have been about 8 or 9 years old. And same thing there. My dad would occasionally take me to work with him, to the Tonight Show in New York. And it was, it's kind of overwhelming. You're in New York City at Rockefeller Center on like one of the main stages there. And even as a little kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, I realized, wow, something big is happening here. And Uncle John is like a star. I mean, he's really a bigwig here. So I learned, I got that down pretty early on. And then I'm sorry, what was the second half of your question?
Did he ever take you out on the yacht? Because his yacht
Oh,
was always in the paparazzi photos, and it was like that was a big thing, catching Johnny on the yacht.
that was, yeah. And the answer is yes. I've been out on the yacht about 3 different times. The Serengeti was what it was named, and I'll tell you, that was fun. I mean, that was just, it was like a house, like the size, more square footage than the house I live in right now. But beautiful boat, and we went out 2 or 3 times and had just a really nice lunch. He had a crew of about 4 or 5 people that actually lived on the boat full time. A cook, a captain, a couple of whatever they're called, mates. I'm not sure, but man, that was a treat. I mean, again, another experience that I'm just lucky to have been a part of. I mean, I didn't do anything to deserve some of these opportunities or experiences. I just happened to be a nephew, a lucky nephew.
Well, and I'm going to throw one more in there because you were a nephew, you actually got privileges at Point Doom for surfing. You took me there once, which is hard to get into. So Point Doom's awesome. I want to know, what's the biggest wave you've ridden, and where are some of the most fun places you've surfed, and then we're going to kind of wrap this up.
Gotcha. Well, it was super. You're right. Point Dume is a great surf spot in Malibu, and Johnny had his house was directly above it on the bluff, so that was kind of cool. You're right. That was super nice. But the biggest wave I've ever ridden was probably in Hawaii for sure. North shore of Oahu, north shore of Kauai. Probably, if you measured the face of the wave, probably 20 feet maybe. Like maybe 2 stories tall, or I guess not 2 stories, but probably 20 feet. And of course, that was back when I was younger and I was stronger and I could, paddle much better than now. I would never go out in conditions like that now. The worst experience I ever had was on the north shore of Oahu, where we went out at Sunset Beach. A notorious big wave spot, and I almost drowned. I think I took off on the first wave and didn't make it, fell, and the power was just so incredible. It like pinned me, it forced me underwater down to the bottom of what I must have been 20 feet underwater, and just held down for the longest time. I mean, I barely made it out, and finally popped up and got some air, and looked around and said, you know what? I'm way in over my head out here. This is not good. I definitely could drown out here. So I turned around and just paddled in right away. I was in way over my head.
Yeah, that Sunset's always been a dream of mine, but now I'm not so sure because of age and your story. As I'm wrapping up, I have one question I'd like to ask everyone at the end of each conversation is, what did we not talk about, or what did I not ask that you really want people to know? Is there something that we didn't say that you really want to get out there?
I don't know. I think we covered some pretty good territory. There's not anything in particular. I guess I would just say that, again, being a relative of a famous person definitely had its perks, and was enjoyable. Like I say, it afforded me some opportunities and some experiences that you can't buy or replace in any way. And I'm grateful for that. I think Uncle John and my dad just had spectacular careers, and I wish I was half as successful as they were. Yeah, and I don't have anything else. I'm just, like I say, grateful to be a part of, even in a small way, such a successful group of people, and that includes your sister, yourself, your wife, your kids, everything. It's been a pretty wonderful life.
Well, I love you, man, and I'm super thankful that you took your time out today to be with us here on Relatively Famous. And hopefully we'll get you back on. I may have to get your wife on, because her brother's also an Emmy-winning producer. She's a big sportscaster. Let's just keep crossing this thing around.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time, and everybody, Chris Carson.
All right. Thanks, Chip. I love you too, brother.
We'll chat again soon. Thank you again for everyone for joining us. I'd like to thank our partner, Nelco Media, for making this happen. Without them, I would still be sitting at home doing, I wish I had a podcast. For you, the viewer, I don't know if you happen to just come across us while scrolling, or if you know about us, but I am eternally grateful and humbled that you took the time to spend with us. And I hope you continue to watch our podcast, listen to our podcast, follow us on all social media. Share, if you like it, share it with your friends, family, co-workers. And if you know someone famous or related to someone famous, let us know. Thanks very much. Have a great day.
You've been listening to Relatively Famous with Chip White. Please like and subscribe to Relatively Famous with Chip White.